You get sensitive about the fact that people say he'll never take a serious controversy.
Well, I have an answer to that. I said, now, tell me the last time that Jack Benny, Red Skelton, Vinny, comedian.
He made millions laugh, but no one knew the dark truth hiding off camera. For decades, the Johnny Carson mystery has been buried. Until now, shocking secrets, hidden scandals, and the revelation no fan ever saw coming. This isn't the Johnny Carson you thought you knew. The mystery is finally solved, and it's not good.
I think one of the dangers, if you are a comedian and start to comment on social issues, your sense of humor suffers somewhere. And we've had some criticism on the show. Some critics over the years says, well, the show has no great sociological value.
He was one of the most recognizable faces on American television, yet his beginnings were far from glamorous. Long before Johnny Carson became known as the host of The Tonight Show, he was simply a quiet boy growing up in the Midwest. His story began in Corning, Iowa, where he was born on October 23, 1925. Like many families during that time, the Carsons moved around in search of stability before eventually settling in Norfolk, Nebraska. It was in Norfolk that Johnny spent most of his formative years that would quietly shape both his strengths and his lifelong struggles. Johnny was not the type of child who commanded attention in the classroom or on the playground. Teachers and neighbors often described him as reserved, shy, and sometimes withdrawn. While other boys played sports or joined large groups of friends, Johnny found comfort in quieter activities. He was bookish, spent long hours by himself, and preferred to retreat into his own world. One of his main escapes was magic. He discovered a fascination with sleight of hand at a young age and began practicing obsessively. To him, magic was more than just a hobby. It gave him a sense of control in a world where he often felt overlooked. By learning tricks and illusions, he could grab attention without revealing too much of himself. Neighbors and schoolmates became his first audience. He would perform small shows, testing out card tricks and coin illusions, slowly gaining confidence in his ability to entertain. The performances were not about sharing his emotions or letting people in, but rather about hiding behind the skill itself. Magic gave him a role to play, a mask that could shield him from vulnerability. In many ways, it planted the first seeds of his future career in entertainment, though at that stage it was a form of protection rather than ambition. The roots of Johnny's tendency to keep people at a distance can be traced back to his home life. His mother, Ruth, was remembered as a cold and demanding woman. Accounts from relatives and people who knew the family suggest that she rarely showed warmth or affection towards her children. Johnny in particular seemed unable to win her approval, no matter how well he behaved or how successful he was in his early pursuits. His father, Homer, worked as a manager for a power company. He was not cruel or neglectful, but he was emotionally distant. While he provided for the family, he didn't play an active role in shaping Johnny's sense of connection or security. This left Johnny with the feeling of being on his own, even inside his own household. He worked tirelessly to get his mother's attention. Later in life, he admitted that whenever he got a laugh on stage, he imagined it was for her. The applause and laughter of strangers became a substitute for the validation he never received at home. But the approval he longed for never came. Ruth remained critical and detached, and this lack of affection left a lasting mark on Johnny's personality. As a result, Johnny built an emotional wall that stayed with him well into adulthood. He learned early on to keep his feelings private and to avoid vulnerability. Outwardly, he could be funny, clever, and charming. Inwardly, he rarely let anyone get close enough to see what was behind the mask. Even as millions of viewers would later welcome him into their homes every night, he struggled to let people truly know him. Norfolk itself was a quiet town, typical of the Midwest. It provided a safe but uneventful environment, far from the bustling world of Hollywood where Johnny would eventually make his name. The contrast between his small-town childhood and his future as a television icon is striking. Those who knew him as a boy often recalled how unlikely it seemed that he would grow up to command national attention. He wasn't the loudest voice in the room or the natural center of attention, yet there was something simmering beneath the surface, an ability to observe, to control timing, and to use performance as a shield. At school, Johnny wasn't unpopular, but he wasn't the kind of student remembered for charisma or confidence either. He didn't lead sports teams or join large social groups. Instead, he channeled his energy into intellectual and creative interests. Magic was one part of this, but he also read widely and studied how performers carried themselves. These private interests slowly built his understanding of timing, presentation, and how to capture an audience's attention without revealing too much about himself personally. Looking back, his childhood makes sense in the context of the entertainer he later became. On stage, he was smooth, quick-witted, and in control. Offstage, he remained guarded and difficult to know. This duality, the separation between public charm and private reserve, can be traced directly to those early years in Nebraska. He became skilled at offering just enough of himself to win admiration, but never enough to risk rejection. Despite the emotional distance at home, Johnny's fascination with magic and performance gave him small windows of recognition. By his teenage years, he was performing at local events and gaining a reputation in town as someone with unusual talent. For a boy who had struggled to find his place socially, these small successes were significant. They gave him a taste of what it felt like to be appreciated, even if that appreciation was for an act rather than for who he truly was. The key to understanding Johnny Carson's later life is to see how much of his personality was formed in these years. The coldness of his mother, the quiet passivity of his father, and the safety of a small Midwestern town created someone who valued control, secrecy, and distance. At the same time, the discovery of magic gave him a tool to channel his need for recognition. He learned that performance could protect him while also drawing others in. As he grew older, this pattern became a defining feature of his character. He could hold an audience of millions, making them laugh night after night, while keeping nearly everyone in his personal life at arm's length. The boy who performed card tricks for neighbors became the man who performed monologues for America, but the motivation remained remarkably similar: hide the vulnerable self behind the confident performer. By the time he left Norfolk to join the Navy during the Second World War, Johnny Carson had already developed the habits that would stay with him for life. He was ambitious and talented, but also cautious and private. He wanted success, but not the intimacy that often comes with it. His childhood had shown him that attention could be won through performance, but real connection was far more elusive. His foundation explains why, later in life, he seemed to thrive in front of cameras but falter in close relationships. It wasn't simply fame that isolated him. It was a pattern set in motion from the very beginning. The shy boy from Nebraska carried that distance with him wherever he went, even as he rose to become one of the most celebrated television hosts of all time. Johnny Carson's early years may not have hinted at the scale of his future success, but they revealed the underlying dynamics that defined his entire life. A longing for approval that never came, a reliance on performance as both escape and validation, and a tendency to guard his emotions carefully. These were not temporary traits. They became the blueprint for his career, his relationships, and the way he moved through the world. After finishing high school in Norfolk, Johnny Carson's path, like that of many young men of his generation, was shaped by the Second World War. At just 18 years old, he enlisted in the United States Navy. It was 1943, and America was deeply involved in the conflict. Although Johnny had grown up in a small town, his world quickly expanded when he entered military service. He trained as a communications officer and was assigned to serve aboard the USS Pennsylvania, a battleship that had already seen its share of action in the Pacific theater. The war years were not filled with dramatic combat experiences for him personally, but they left their mark nonetheless. Carson later admitted that he was fortunate to avoid the most dangerous assignments. Still, being part of the Navy exposed him to discipline, structure, and the camaraderie of life at sea. These years also gave him an audience of peers who appreciated his quick wit and magic tricks. During downtime on the ship, Johnny entertained fellow sailors using his deck of cards to perform illusions and lighten the mood. The Navy gave him his first taste of entertaining people beyond his small hometown, and it confirmed something he had already begun to suspect. He could hold attention and make people feel better simply by performing. When the war ended in 1945, Johnny returned home to Nebraska, ready to continue his education. With the help of the GI Bill, enrolled at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. Initially, he considered studying journalism, but he eventually settled on speech and drama, fields that felt more closely aligned with his growing interest in performance and communication. The university years gave him opportunities to explore his talents in a more formal way. He joined student organizations, practiced public speaking, and continued refining his performance skills. Carson completed his degree in 1949, writing a thesis that examined the way comedians use humor to influence their audiences. The topic showed just how seriously he had begun to think about entertainment. For him, comedy wasn't just about making people laugh, it was about understanding timing, psychology, and human behavior. It was a craft that required study as much as natural instinct. After graduation, Johnny wasted no time in pursuing a career in broadcasting. His first job was with WADOU Radio in Omaha, Nebraska, where he worked as an announcer. This entry-level role gave him valuable experience behind the microphone, and it wasn't long before he transitioned into television, which was still a relatively new medium in the late 1940s and early 1950s. His early television work included hosting a program called The Squirrel's Nest, where his mix of humor and playfulness began to shine. In 1951, Carson made a bold move by heading to Los Angeles, where opportunities in television were growing rapidly. He took a position as a writer for Red Skelton, a well-known comedian of the era. Working for an established star was a crucial step for Johnny. It exposed him to the inner workings of professional comedy and television production. He was no longer a small-town performer. He was now contributing to nationally recognized entertainment. Carson's big break came in 1955 when he was given his own variety show on CBS called Carson's Cellar. The program was modest and short-lived, lasting only a few months, but it allowed him to experiment and develop his style. He relied on clever wordplay, sharp timing, and a wry sense of humor that set him apart from more boisterous performers. Even though Carson's Cellar was canceled, the show caught the attention of network executives, and his reputation began to grow. Over the next several years, Johnny worked on various television projects, sometimes as a host and sometimes as a guest. His versatility and quick wit made him a reliable presence, and he steadily built a reputation as someone who could adapt to different formats. He also gained valuable on-air experience that would serve him well later. In 1957, Carson was offered the role of host for the game show Who Do You Trust? The program became a turning point in his career. Unlike other game shows of the time, it placed a heavy emphasis on interaction between the host and contestants. Johnny used this opportunity to sharpen his interviewing skills and develop his ability to respond quickly to unscripted moments. He would often ask contestants humorous or unexpected questions, turning what could have been a simple exchange into a comedic highlight. Audiences enjoyed his charm and intelligence, and the show gave him a platform to showcase his personality more fully. It was during this period that Carson caught the attention of NBC executives who were looking for a successor to Jack Paar, the host of The Tonight Show. Paar had made the late-night talk show a national institution, but he was unpredictable and at times volatile. NBC wanted someone who could maintain the program's success while bringing stability. Johnny Carson fit the description. He was witty, reliable, and capable of handling both scripted comedy and spontaneous conversation. Still, Carson was hesitant to take on such a high-profile role. Hosting The Tonight Show meant a huge commitment, and Johnny valued his privacy. He also recognized the immense pressure that came with following established stars. Initially, he turned down the offer. But NBC was persistent, and eventually he agreed. On October 1, 1962, Johnny Carson officially took over as the host of The Tonight Show. The transition was not immediate. Many viewers were skeptical, unsure if Carson could live up to his predecessors. The first few years were challenging as Johnny worked to establish his style and win over the audience. But slowly, his approach began to resonate. He blended sharp monologues with relaxed interviews, creating an atmosphere that felt both entertaining and comfortable. His humor was clever without being offensive, and his ability to make guests feel at ease became one of his trademarks. Carson's version of The Tonight Show introduced a format that would become the standard for late-night television, a mix of topical monologues, sketches, interviews, and performances. His timing was impeccable, and his ability to ad-lib during unexpected moments became legendary. Whether it was covering for a guest who was running late or reacting to a joke that fell flat, Johnny had a way of keeping the show moving while making it feel effortless. Behind the scenes, however, the pressure was enormous. The demands of producing a nightly show meant long hours, constant attention to current events, and the challenge of staying fresh. Carson's disciplined upbringing and perfectionist tendencies helped him handle the workload, but it also took a personal toll. Still, his public persona never revealed the strain. To viewers at home, he seemed calm, collected, and always in control. By the mid-1960s, Johnny Carson was no longer just a host, he was a cultural fixture. His influence extended beyond The Tonight Show, shaping comedy and television in ways that are still felt today. Comedians looked up to him, aspiring hosts studied his techniques, and millions of viewers tuned in every night to see what he would say or do. The shy boy from Nebraska had become the face of late-night television. but he had done so by carefully managing the balance between charm and restraint, humor and reserve. This period of his life marked the transition from promising young entertainer to established star. It showed his determination, his adaptability, and his commitment to the craft of entertainment. At the same time, it hinted at the personal costs that would become more visible in the years ahead. For now, though, Johnny Carson achieved what countless performers dream of. He was at the center of American culture, with a platform that reached millions night after night. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, Johnny Carson had become a household name. Hosting The Tonight Show transformed him into one of the most recognizable figures in American entertainment. His face and voice were familiar companions for millions of viewers who tuned in each night. Yet while Carson's public life looked polished and secure, his private life was far more complicated. Fame brought him power, wealth, and influence, but it also highlighted the tensions and struggles he carried with him from earlier years. Carson's rise to the top of late-night television made him an institution. His monologues became the day's unofficial commentary, offering lighthearted takes on politics, culture, and everyday life. Viewers trusted him to guide them through the news with humor that was sharp yet rarely cruel. He became a unifying presence in living rooms across the country. At his peak, it was estimated that more than 10 million people watched The Tonight Show regularly, making him one of the most influential voices in media. This show's success also meant Carson had immense sway over careers in entertainment. A comedian who landed a spot on The Tonight Show could see their fortunes change overnight. If Johnny invited a guest to the couch after their performance, it was a signal to the industry that this person had talent worth noticing. Many comics who later became legends themselves credited Carson with giving them their first big break. His approval was not just a compliment, it was a career-defining moment. Yet while Carson thrived professionally, his personal relationships were far less stable. He married 4 times over the course of his life, and each marriage ended in divorce. His first marriage to Jody Wolcott began in 1949, just as he was starting out in broadcasting. The couple had 3 sons together, but the marriage was troubled almost from the beginning. By 1963, they divorced, and Johnny's career was already pulling him further away from family life. His second marriage to Joanne Copeland in 1963 lasted nearly a decade. This period coincided with some of his biggest professional achievements. But the relationship became strained. Carson's long hours, his heavy drinking, and his guarded personality created distance between him and his wife. They divorced in 1972. With Joanne receiving a substantial settlement that reflected the financial success Johnny had achieved. Carson married for a 3rd time in 1972, this time to Joanna Holland. The marriage lasted until 1983, but once again the same patterns emerged. He was charming in public, generous in certain ways, yet emotionally unavailable and often distracted by his demanding career. By the time this 3rd marriage ended, Carson had developed a reputation for being unlucky in love, though many observers believe the real issue was his inability to let people get close to him. The repeated breakdown of his marriages revealed something important about Carson's personality. While he was adored by millions, he struggled with intimacy. The emotional walls he had built in childhood remained intact. He could deliver laughs with ease, but genuine vulnerability was much harder for him. He admitted in interviews that he was not easy to live with, and those who knew him personally described him as distant, private, and sometimes cold. Alongside these personal challenges, Carson also wrestled with alcohol. He was known for enjoying drinks both during and after work, and there were times when his temper became an issue. Colleagues recalled moments when Johnny, usually so composed on camera, displayed flashes of anger in private. Alcohol often played a role in these incidents, intensifying his already complex personality. Although he never let it destroy his career, his drinking added another layer of instability to his private life. Despite the turbulence behind the scenes, The Tonight Show continued to flourish. Carson's skill as a broadcaster was unmatched. He had an instinct for pacing, knowing when to push a joke and when to let a moment breathe. His interviews appeared effortless, but they were underpinned by careful preparation and sharp instincts. He could shift between light humor and more serious conversation without losing the audience. His ability to connect with guests, even when he gave little away about himself, was part of what made him so effective. Another defining feature of Carson's tenure was his ability to stay relevant across decades of cultural change. From the political upheavals of the 1960s to the pop culture of the 1980s, He adjusted his material without losing his distinctive style. His humor was broad enough to appeal to a wide audience, yet sharp enough to feel intelligent. In many ways, he became a cultural barometer, reflecting shifts in American life while providing a consistent anchor each night. Carson's influence extended far beyond the screen. He was one of the highest-paid entertainers of his era, securing contracts worth tens of millions of dollars. His wealth allowed him a lifestyle of luxury, with homes in Los Angeles and Malibu, and a penchant for expensive cars and yachts. Yet, even with this success, those close to him noted that he never seemed entirely content. He enjoyed his wealth and status, but remained at his core a solitary figure. His relationship with his children was also strained. Carson was not known for being an involved father, particularly as his career consumed more of his time. His 3 sons grew up largely outside the spotlight, and while there were moments of closeness, there were also long stretches of distance. Tragedy struck in 1991, when his youngest son Richard died in a car accident. Carson was deeply affected, and during one of his rare public acknowledgments of personal grief, he spoke briefly about the loss on The Tonight Show. It was a reminder to many viewers that behind the polished performer was a man who carried his own private pain. As the 1970s turned into the 1980s, Carson's stature remained secure. He had become the gold standard for late-night hosts, and his show was a nightly ritual for millions. Yet he was increasingly aware of the pressures and limitations of the role. The demands of producing fresh content every evening were relentless, and Carson began to take more time off. Guest hosts, such as Jay Leno, David Letterman, and Joan Rivers often filled in, giving audiences a glimpse of what the future of late-night television might look like. These years also saw Carson becoming more selective in his public appearances. He rarely gave interviews, preferring to let his work on The Tonight Show speak for itself. This choice added to his mystique. To the public, Johnny Carson was both omnipresent and elusive. He was in their living rooms every night, yet they knew very little about his private life. This balance between visibility and mystery only increased his aura of authority in the entertainment world. Even with his reserved personality, Carson left a profound impact on those who worked with him. Many comedians and entertainers spoke of his generosity, particularly in the way he helped launch careers. At the same time, colleagues recognized the boundaries he kept. He was approachable on set, but few could claim to know him well off camera. This duality, warm on stage, distant in private, remained the central contradiction of his character. By the mid-1980s, Carson had already surpassed 2 decades as the king of late-night television. His position seemed unshakable, and his legacy was secure. Yet he remained a complex figure, celebrated for his talent but marked by personal challenges that fame and fortune could never resolve. He was adored by an audience that saw him as a nightly companion, but in his own life he often stood apart, walled off by the same defenses he had built as a boy in Nebraska. The contrast between Johnny Carson the entertainer and Johnny Carson the man was never more visible than during this period. On one hand, he was a symbol of success, wealth, and cultural influence. On the other, he was a man navigating failed marriages, strained family ties, and an ongoing battle with loneliness. His story during these years is not just one of triumph, but also of the personal costs that came with becoming an icon. Hosting a nightly show required an almost unimaginable level of commitment. The work was not just about the hour in front of the camera, but also the constant preparation, reading, writing, rehearsing, and keeping up with current events. For years, Carson thrived under this pressure, but he gradually grew weary of the demands. He began to take longer breaks, relying more heavily on guest hosts to keep the program running during his absences. David Letterman, Jay Leno, and Joan Rivers were among those who filled in, each developing their own style while standing in Johnny's shadow. In private, Carson often expressed ambivalence about fame. He enjoyed the privileges his success brought, including financial security and the ability to live comfortably in California, but he never seemed entirely at ease with the public attention. He guarded his privacy closely, rarely giving interviews and seldom appearing at social events. Those who knew him well said he valued his quiet time, particularly on his yacht or at his home in Malibu, far away from the spotlight. The 1980s also brought new challenges to late-night television. Cable television was expanding, offering audiences more choices, and rival programs were beginning to emerge. Still, Carson's Tonight Show remained the benchmark. His steady presence reassured viewers even as the media landscape shifted. Yet Carson himself began to feel that the time was approaching to step away. In 1991, Carson announced his decision to retire. The announcement was met with both shock and sadness from his audience, many of whom could not remember a time without him on their screens. His final show aired on May 22, 1992. It was an emotional farewell marked by tributes, clips, and heartfelt moments. Unlike his usual broadcasts, where humor kept everything light, this show revealed glimpses of the man behind the performer. Viewers saw Johnny Carson, who was reflective, grateful, and even a bit vulnerable as he said goodbye after nearly 30 years. The final broadcast drew one of the largest television audiences in history. More than 50 million people tuned in to watch, a testament to the extraordinary impact he had on American culture. For many, it felt like the end of an era. The Tonight Show would continue under Jay Leno, but Carson's version had become so deeply woven into daily life that his departure left a void that could never truly be filled. After retirement, Carson largely withdrew from public life. He was occasionally seen at events or mentioned in the press, but he resisted opportunities to return to television in any regular capacity. Offers came his way, specials, interviews, even new shows, but he declined them all. Having given so much of himself to nightly television, he seemed content to step back completely. In rare moments when he did appear, such as a brief cameo on David Letterman's program in 1994, audiences were reminded of the warmth and timing that had made him a legend. But these appearances were fleeting, and Carson quickly returned to his private world. For the most part, Johnny spent his retirement years out of the spotlight, enjoying his passions, which included reading, sailing, and following tennis. Those close to him described this period as peaceful. After decades of relentless pressure, he finally had the chance to live on his own terms. He continued to watch The Tonight Show occasionally, and it was widely believed that he preferred Letterman's style over that of Leno, though he rarely commented publicly. Despite his retreat from public life, Carson's influence never faded. Comedians and hosts regularly cited him as the gold standard. His style of humor, his ability to balance intelligence with accessibility, and his skill at making interviews feel natural continued to inspire new generations. For many, he remained the definitive late-night host, the one against whom all others were measured. Carson's later years were not without challenges. In the early 2000s, reports emerged that he was suffering from emphysema, a result of decades of heavy smoking. Though he had quit smoking years earlier, the damage to his lungs had already been done. His health gradually declined, and on January 23, 2005, Johnny Carson passed away at the age of 79. His death was met with an outpouring of tributes from across the entertainment world. Colleagues, comedians, and fans alike spoke of his brilliance, his influence, and the unique place he held in American culture. The legacy he left behind is hard to overstate. Carson didn't just host a television show, he defined what late-night television could be. The format he perfected, a sharp monologue, playful sketches, and relaxed interviews, became the blueprint followed by hosts who came after him. Jay Leno, David Letterman, Conan O'Brien, Jimmy Fallon, and many others all owed something to Carson's example. Even today, when late-night shows are plentiful and audiences are fragmented, his influence can still be felt in the rhythm and style of the genre. Beyond the mechanics of television, Carson's cultural impact was enormous. For 30 years, he was a constant presence in American life, someone who could comment on the events of the day with humor that united rather than divided. He offered laughter during times of national tension, comfort during moments of uncertainty, and joy in the ordinary routines of daily life. For millions of viewers, ending the day with Johnny Carson became a ritual that stretched across decades. Carson also changed the careers of countless performers. A single appearance on The Tonight Show could launch a comedian from obscurity to fame. His decision to bring someone over to the guest chair after a performance was often the moment that turned a career. He had an unmatched eye for talent, and his support gave confidence to performers who would later become stars in their own right. At the same time, his personal life remained a cautionary tale. His struggles with intimacy, his failed marriages, and his sometimes volatile personality highlighted the costs of fame and the difficulty of balancing public success with private happiness. While audiences saw a genial, witty host, those closest to him often saw a man who was guarded, private, and difficult to reach emotionally. This contrast between public warmth and private distance became a central part of his story. In the years since his death, Johnny Carson's reputation has only grown. Documentaries, books, and retrospectives have explored his life and career, attempting to understand the man behind the curtain. Many of these accounts agree on a few key points: his genius as a broadcaster, his deep influence on comedy and television, and his enduring mystery as a private individual. Unlike many stars who extend their careers beyond their prime, Carson left at the height of his relevance and never looked back. This decision preserved his image as sharp, witty, and timeless. For many fans, what remains most vivid are the countless small moments: a perfectly delivered punchline, a spontaneous exchange with a guest, or the easy way he made millions of viewers feel as if he were speaking directly to them. Johnny Carson may have been guarded in his personal life, but on television, he gave audiences a gift every night. That gift was laughter, comfort, and a sense of connection that has proven lasting. Johnny Carson's story is one of contrasts: immense public success alongside private struggles, warmth on stage and distance from it. A man who defined an era yet kept much of himself hidden. His life reflected the complexities of fame, the challenges of intimacy, and the enduring power of performance. In the end, his legacy is not just that of a television host, but of a cultural icon whose influence continues to shape entertainment to this day.